My daughter smiled at me, raised her glass, and wished me a happy 70th birthday. 30 seconds later, I heard her whisper the words that shattered my heart. "While I keep her busy, go change the locks." She thought I was just an old woman enjoying birthday cake. She had no idea I had already uncovered her secret months earlier. And she definitely had no idea that the house she was trying to steal no longer belonged to me. What happened next left my daughter speechless, her husband terrified, and everyone in that restaurant staring in complete shock. I never thought the most painful betrayal of my life would come from the little girl I spent my entire life protecting. The moment I realized who my daughter had become happened on my 70th birthday. What was supposed to be a joyful family lunch turned into the day I discovered just how far greed could push someone. The restaurant was crowded and cheerful. My granddaughter was taking endless pictures, my niece was talking excitedly about an upcoming vacation, and waiters moved between tables carrying plates of food and birthday desserts. Everything looked normal. Then I heard my daughter whisper to her husband, "While I keep her busy, go change the locks." For a second I froze. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. Then I watched her husband quietly stand up from the table and walk toward the exit. My heart sank. The worst part was not what they were planning. The worst part was how casual they sounded. They spoke as if they were discussing grocery shopping instead of trying to take control of the house I had spent 40 years building. My daughter turned toward me and smiled. "Mom, are you having a good birthday?" I smiled back. Inside, I felt completely numb. But unlike them, I already knew exactly what they were planning. Months earlier, I had accidentally uncovered their secret. Before I explain what happened that day, you need to understand why that house meant everything to me. 40 years ago, I was a young widow with a 3-year-old daughter and almost no money. My husband died suddenly in a construction accident. One moment I had a future, and the next I was staring at medical bills, funeral expenses, and an empty bank account. I remember sitting alone in a tiny apartment after the funeral while my daughter slept beside me. I had less than $100 left to my name. I promised myself that night that no matter how difficult life became, my daughter would never feel the fear I was feeling. I worked every shift available at the local hospital. I cleaned rooms, carried supplies, changed bedding, and eventually went back to school to become a nurse. I worked days, nights, weekends, and holidays. While other people slept, I worked. While other people celebrated, I worked. Every extra dollar went into savings. Years later, I finally bought a small piece of land outside the city. It was empty and undeveloped, but it belonged to me. Slowly, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, I built my dream home. That house represented every sacrifice I ever made. My daughter grew up there. She celebrated birthdays there. She opened Christmas gifts there. She brought her future husband there. I thought those memories would mean something to her. Apparently, I was wrong. As she got older, I noticed changes. Whenever she visited, she seemed more interested in the house than in me. She would ask about property values. She would ask whether I had updated my will. She would ask what would happen to the house after I was gone. At first, I ignored it. Then one day I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I had stopped by her house to drop off a sweater I had knitted for my grandson. The front door was slightly open, and as I approached, I heard voices coming from the study. My daughter and her husband were speaking with a lawyer. The conversation was about guardianship. They were discussing ways to convince a judge that I could no longer manage my own affairs. They talked about medical evaluations. They talked about claiming I was forgetful. They talked about gaining temporary control over my finances and property. I stood there in complete shock. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for was planning how to take away my independence. I quietly left without making a sound. That night, I cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because of the house, because my daughter no longer saw me as her mother. She saw me as an obstacle standing between her and an inheritance. The next morning, I made a decision. If they wanted my house so badly, they were going to be disappointed. Over the next few months, I met with attorneys, financial advisors, and real estate agents. I kept everything private. I sold the house. I bought a beautiful apartment in a secure building and invested the remaining money so I could comfortably support myself for the rest of my life. By the time my daughter discovered the truth, every document had been signed and every detail finalized. Which brings me back to my birthday lunch. Nearly an hour after leaving, my son-in-law finally returned. The moment I saw him, I knew exactly what had happened. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. Sweat covered his forehead. My daughter immediately stood up. "What happened?" He looked at her, then at me, then back at her. "The house is gone. For a moment, nobody moved. What do you mean it is gone? She sold it. The words seemed to hit her like a truck. There are new owners living there. Everything is legal. The expression on her face was something I will never forget. Shock, disbelief, panic. She slowly turned toward me. You sold the house? I calmly picked up my glass. Yes. When? Several weeks ago. Why did you not tell us? Because it was my decision, not yours. The color drained from her face. That house was supposed to be our inheritance. Several nearby diners turned toward our table. For years I would have felt embarrassed. Not that day. I looked directly at her. That house was my home before it was ever your inheritance. There is a difference. She accused me of betraying the family. The irony was unbelievable. The woman who had spent months planning how to take control of my life was now accusing me of betrayal. For the first time in years, I stopped protecting her feelings. I told her exactly what I knew. I told her about the lawyer. I told her about the guardianship discussion. I told her about the plans to control my finances. The look on her face confirmed everything. She knew I was telling the truth. The lunch ended shortly afterward. She left angry. Her husband followed. Neither one had anything left to say. Months have passed since that day. We barely speak now. It hurts. A mother never completely stops loving her child. But I have learned something important. Love does not require surrender. Kindness does not require weakness. And protecting yourself is not selfish. Every morning I wake up in my new apartment, drink coffee on my balcony, and enjoy the peace I worked my entire life to earn. The house is gone, but my freedom remains, and that is worth far more than any inheritance.